Solana's biggest annual conference wraps up in a week where the US central bank finally cut rates for the first time since early 2020. We cover all this and more right now in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights, and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes. Nick, got a lot to get through this week.
Sure do. Solana Breakpoint just looked like an absolute fire hose of announcements, information, and we finally got details of Firedancer and the first implementation, which I think hit mainnet. So really excited to talk more about Solana, but perhaps before we get into that, as you mentioned, big news on the rate front.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be looked at in years to come, the start of the rate cutting cycle. So the Federal Reserve last week announced a cut of 50 basis points, which, yeah, as we said last week, rate cuts were going to happen. It was just a matter of how the extent of it. And more importantly, I would say they even released their forecast for rate cuts going forward. As they always do, they update that every quarter. And interestingly, by the end of next year, so the end of 2025, the US Central Bank expects another 150 basis points worth of rate cuts between the November meeting, noting that they skip October, and the end of 2025. So yeah, as we said, this is really the start of the rate cutting cycle. That's the biggest thing to take away. And yeah, other areas around the world, of course, are also cutting rates at the moment. So as we've explained many times, this generally is good news for risk assets such as cryptocurrencies. Just some other highlights from the week. We saw ETH BTC falling to its lowest level since April 2021, as I get up on my screen here, really just to show how badly, I suppose, this has performed. As we know, Bitcoin normally tends to dominate at the start of a bull market, which has happened this time. But can we see this correcting? Time will tell. And then sort of related to that, we saw Bitcoin dominance hitting a 3.5-year high of 58.5%. So if you said the crypto market, 58.5% of that value goes towards Bitcoin, which is, yeah, really a high figure. So we'll see how much further that goes up or if this is indeed the top. But let's get into the spate of news this week. Nick, we'll kick things off with Donald Trump, as we've done a lot this year.
Yeah, he finally held a Twitter live stream sharing details about, their new associated DeFi platform, which is called World Liberty Financial. I'll save you the 2 hours there. It was definitely not worth the listen. A bit harrowing because they absolutely waffled on for God knows how long and revealed very, very little about what the actual platform does, apart from some really vague explanations about stablecoins and connecting to DeFi and just creating a better user experience for people to access these type of lending services. They really revealed details about their native tokens. So yes, there will be a token powering this platform. It would be called the WLFI token. And it kind of wasn't as badly distributed or will be distributed as initially thought. There were rumors that it was going to be a 70%, pre-mine or, allocation towards the key team, but that's looking more like it's going to actually be 63% that's gone to a public sale in the future. They haven't had any announcement yet on the actual date. The team will get about 20% and then user rewards will compromise about 17%. So a lot better than we initially thought. More details about the utility. It's going to be exclusively a governance token. They were pretty strict on this, that there's also going to be capped voting at about 5%, and the tokens aren't going to be transferable into a governance vote. So kind of what we saw with EigenLayer, which that one's not yet available to trade as we speak. So a few notable talking points here. The big one really is just very concerning lack of details, and some of the core team too have a lot of unanswered questions around their history. And as we all know, as we talked about on the pod last week, the previous platform that's kind of based on DeFi Finance was exploited for a few $1 million earlier in July. So as always, keep an eye out for scams. There's going to be a lot of people promising that the token sells live. It's only going to be available to whitelisted, investors, so accredited investors. So, your average Joe may not be able to actually access it. And for my mind, a lot really hinges on November 4 on the election, because as they actually talked about in the pod that I didn't see other people pick up, was talking about, hey, something may change in November 4, a few of the team mentions, because, if Trump gets in, who knows, maybe the kind of limitations may be taken off. Who knows? It's probably going to be all up for grabs after November 4 with this token. So nothing to buy just yet, but one to look out for, no doubt, is probably shaping up to be the biggest token launch in quite a while.
Yeah, thanks for that breakdown, Nick. A lot to cover there, and yeah, as you said in your post as well, more details expected soon. And of course, yeah, start of November will be, I suppose, a big factor in relation to how much more we hear about World Liberty Financial for sure. Even though the project says they're not associated with the Trumps, legally. Of course, we know they're the face of it, and that's how anyone knows this project. So we'll see what happens after the election, importantly. So, no, great coverage there. And onto some, really, I suppose, first of its kind news item that came out last week was that the country of Bhutan has turned out very, very likely that they are the address behind an address with 13,000 Bitcoin. So that came out through Arkham Intelligence, the on-chain analytics, and they've sort of pegged it down. So this is the likely holder of this Bitcoin, or this amount of Bitcoin. And why is it a first of its kind? Well, all of this has been acquired not through, seizures of different criminals. And as you see, most governments getting their Bitcoin via those mechanisms. I suppose El Salvador is probably the only one, maybe like Bhutan, who's sort of acquired it through mining, but El Salvador has also been purchasing it off the open market. But Bhutan, from this report and from the understanding, is that they've acquired all of their Bitcoin through mining so far. And they've sold some, but overall, they have now had over 13,000 Bitcoin accumulated. And yeah, they're just quietly going about this. So this has been going on for several years. It's via sort of a state-owned entity that is actually mining using hydropower resources. So sort of some renewable energy sources there for mining Bitcoin. And yeah, so far it looks like they're holding overall. Yeah, and as I said, selling for more operational costs, I would assume. But now having $780 million US worth of Bitcoin, and that is now more than double the amount of El Salvador. So we see the amount of press El Salvador gets in relation to their Bitcoin position, but Bhutan really, I suppose, coming out on the map here. And we may even see confirmation from them that this is indeed their holdings, but I can understand why they probably want to keep it quiet for reasons we've discussed many times over the years. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. And I suppose big takeaway, really, yet another source of demand really for Bitcoin, and in a roundabout way as well. If they're mining Bitcoin but not actually then selling it, like you see many companies having to do eventually, that's also, I suppose, less sell pressure eventually as well for Bitcoin.
For a final third news story I saw here before we get into the conference wrap up is stablecoins are again a hot topic of conversation. BitGo, one of the largest custodians, they actually said that they plan to issue its own stablecoin in January, and even talked about it being yield generating, which would open up a whole new source of competition for the stablecoin market. As we know, USDC and USDT, they do not currently offer yield on that, and they just kind of take that for themselves. And that's why, Tether is one of the most profitable companies on the planet at the moment. And then we also saw reports from Revolut, which is a European kind of fintech company. They're planning to issue a stablecoin. No date just yet as to what that's going to look like or when it's going to happen, but two major sources of big players looking to get into stablecoins. So huge market cap there that's only going to increase, I reckon. And I'm really curious to see what kind of highs we do hit for stablecoins, and whether it's going to be that 200 to 300 billion, and just how high we do go for stablecoins in this bull market.
Yeah, we saw it recently hit an all-time high, as you covered last month, I think, Nick, and we'll see with BitGo's announcement there, which was one of the many at Token2049. And so we'll get into maybe a summary of what is one of the largest crypto events, arguably, depending on the actual data of attendees and compared to previous ones, it could actually technically count as the largest conference ever in the crypto industry. And then after that, we'll go through some Breakpoint conference recaps as well. But onto Token 2049, where do you want to kick things off here, Nick?
I'm happy to kick off maybe the attendance that you talked about. I saw that we unfortunately couldn't attend, but looking on the outside, it looked like it was really well attended with a great turnout. Reports coming out that they sold out or reached that 20,000 people attending, and that was up from 10,000 last year. So it was doubling of the attendance, which is exciting to see. Probably another key takeaway here for me was probably that Asia is probably underappreciated, especially for us, especially being here in Australia or focus in the US and the US market. But, Singapore, a lot of these Asian countries, South Korea, for example, are just huge adopters of cryptocurrency that perhaps we don't really get to see as much in our kind of maybe biased Western view.
Yeah, definitely. That was a takeaway. And even, looking at the sponsors of the event too, like we're so used to covering the same sort of Western companies, you could almost guess which ones will be the sponsors at most conferences. But they were, not nowhere to be seen. Of course, they were present at Token 2049, but none of them were really the headline sponsors. So again, that diversity and I suppose, maturation of the space is really great to see. And I think they had their Dubai Token 2049, about 6 months ago, or even less than that. So this is the first year I think Token 2049 has done 2 conferences in a year, and even then they were able to get such a big attendance in Singapore. So let's go through some of like the main sort of takeaways there. I suppose speaking with Ben, founder and CEO of Collective Shift, and some of his notes or big talking points there were just, I suppose, the blockchains that everyone seems to be talking about. And he sort of mentioned Berachain and Sui as 2 of the most important ones, or the ones that most people are mentioning. And there was also another one that I'm not actually remembering at the moment off the top of my head, that he also said was a surprising one that people were talking about as well. Was there any other notable sort of takeaways you've seen people discussing, Nick?
Probably token launches. So there's been a few reports coming out, even in the lead up to Token 2049, that we're probably going to see a ramp up of altcoin launches as potentially Q4 heats up and into 2025, if maybe prices get another leg up and attention is back on the space. So that's a huge catalyst that I think a lot of people are talking about. Probably the idea that infrastructure is oversaturated. That's probably going to be a key talking point of when we dive into Solana, because Solana was the complete opposite, where it was such a big focus on consumer applications. And I guess being a more Asia-based event, there probably wasn't as much Ethereum and L2 talk in the conference I've been seeing. It was probably really muted. And as you talked about, these Sui, Berachain, these other big layer ones probably garnered a lot more of the attention. And then a major focus here was that, hey, the cringe level was actually pretty high. It's kind of a taste into what the bull market really is like. We saw some crypto flight singing Taylor Swift, which was tough to watch, to be honest. Even seeing some of these Sui parties that were being hosted, like 1,000 people that had bloody Ferris wheel inside the event. They had Steve Aoki. Not sure why he's still associated with the space, considering that he was pretty down in NFTs, but he's back about it. So these are these kind of indications that we see of what the bull market is like. And it's kind of reaffirms to me, hey, be prepared, because we're only going to see more of this type of behavior and possibly euphoria. That's a good indicator when the market, starts to get another leg higher.
Yeah, great work there, Nick. And I did look up my notes there for the L1 that I was forgetting that was surprisingly discussed a lot, at least according to Ben's recap, was BitTensor. So another one again, and that reminds me also of the big sort of segments everyone was talking about. Not too surprised here that it was decentralized AI, or that crypto XAI, and then also DePIN. So no surprises there. And gaming, from what I've seen, wasn't really a talking point at all. So we're seeing a new wave of potential narratives coming through, and that had already been gaining momentum this year, but it looks like it was, I guess, a more affirmation of that happening at Token 2049.
Perfect there, Matt. Maybe we can shift focus now to Breakpoint, because as I said, that was probably a completely different vibe. It was more focused on the consumer and obviously on Solana projects and what they're building. So probably the biggest thing to kick off here is Firedancer. We've kept on talking about Firedancer for so long now, but there's a reason why we have, and we were on it so early. It's because it's a huge catalyst for Solana to be more robust. So this introduces a second validator client that's kind of built from scratch to really power Solana and the network. So this is implemented live now on mainnet through what's called Firedancer. So this is just the very first implementation, a kind of hybrid approach to get something out there in the wild, while they also announced the full kind of more fully fleshed out Firedancer actually hit testnet at the conference. So a lot of big announcements, and it was the one that we were all hoping for. And if you're kind of sitting there wondering, why is this so important again? It's just because it's important for the blockchain's decentralization. With just one client, essentially, when you have a bug in the code, it really threatens Solana's liveliness and ability to stay up. But when you have multiple clients, it just means that you have another source of truth there that they can turn to in case there is a bug. And normally the case is if it's completely different, you may not have that bug on that second client, and it just makes the whole ecosystem more robust. So a huge one there, Matt, and I'm really excited to see it finally hit mainnet, possibly into 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. The attendance at the Firedancer, Kevin Bauer's presentation was, yeah, you could tell how packed it was, and I think it was the only thing on the agenda with like more than one, I suppose, speaking slot. So I think they talked about Firedancer at 3 different sort of slots, whereas everything else just had like its own sort of slot as well. So that again just sort of is symbolic of how important this Firedancer launch on mainnet was, and then also just more information about how Firedancer is progressing. So yeah, great summary there, Nick. And other takeaways, there were many from Solana Breakpoint. Another one, of course, you sort of touched on it earlier, is the consumer applications, and just, I suppose, the balance between consumer apps versus, back-end infrastructure. You said at Token2049 it was a lot more skewed towards the latter, but now we've actually got consumer apps now bringing back the other end of the spectrum for Breakpoint, which was great to see. And yeah, I had a look at some of the presentations, and yeah, was blown away with the variety of different just apps that were just presenting and talking about, how they're using Solana, and not this roundabout way of helping Solana be more scalable and all of that. It was actually, no, here's the thing we're building, here's all the users we're targeting, and here's the progress we're making and what we're doing in the next 12 months, which was, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I guess onto that point, DePIN is probably the big focus as well from that consumer, and then even from just a business angle of why you'd want to build on Solana. Crypto can kind of get a bad rap there of like, what's the use case for all this? DePIN really stands up as a huge use case because you can kind of build token incentives and encourage behavior in a way you couldn't really do before in an accessible way. So there's lots of teams building in this, and I saw there was a huge $100 million fund that was created. I think it was the 3rd fund on DePIN to really fund these activities. There was a few like Dawn that's going to be launching soon. There's Helium, which is probably the poster child for DePIN, as well as things like Hivemapper and then other crypto AI intersections there who try and leverage the same idea and creating some physical infrastructure and connecting, whether it's a user to GPUs. You can all do that on Solana, which is a really exciting use case. Definitely.
And I think one of the benefits of a blockchain maturing is you eventually sort of capture the attention of, I suppose, not just the hobbyists and the garage sort of builders, but you also now get big companies, and that's a phase that Solana is well and truly entering. And Breakpoint was another reminder of just how far it's coming, capturing the attentions of Franklin Templeton, PayPal, even Societe Generale, a company bank there in France. And I suppose the biggest one to talk about is PayPal, of course. We've seen PYUSD launched on Ethereum last year, launched on Solana earlier this year, and they've been bringing a lot of incentives on the likes of Camino and other DeFi projects. And we've got a quote here from the head of crypto at PayPal saying, quote unquote, Ethereum isn't fit for payments, and token extensions was a big reason why we chose Solana, they were saying. So I would expect PYUSD to continue growing very strongly as these incentives continue. And then after that, I would be even more keen to see what PayPal does in the Solana ecosystem once they really get their footing with that stablecoin.
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest takeaways for me, was just that chains and fintechs are choosing Solana in a really big, tangible way, because we saw this before with the likes of Visa, who were using it for stablecoin settlement, but then we also saw more sophisticated adoption on Solana Pay, for example. So these big institutions are really choosing Solana, and it's only continuing into the conference. Franklin Templeton was another one who announced they're going to launch money market funds natively on Solana. Even Sky, formerly Maker, they proposed something in the governance forum to launch on Solana too. So it's really from all angles that Solana is gaining a lot of attention and a lot of adoption, especially Ethereum applications that are moving there. Finally, I also saw another big announcement was the Solana phone. This was one that went live last year, but there wasn't really many details about it. But we come out and it's called the Seeker, and they've kind of set a mid-2025 release date to it. I was really surprised that it had 140,000 pre-orders, and it looks like those are actually paid. So huge amount of demand. I think a cost probably had a big play to there. The original phone was $1,000 and they've had to reduce that. Now this one's coming in at 500 or 400. So really well-priced phone, and people are really responding in a big way. And this new phone is going to be making a lot of changes with better quality, better specs, for example, because the original Solana phone actually received, the worst phone of the year award by one of the most famous phone bloggers out there. So really exciting to see what that holds. I pre-ordered one myself. If maybe you don't like that price point, there's a $99 one from Jambo Phone, who also worked with Aptos. So they're going to create their own Solana budget phone out there too.
A lot going on the hardware front, and I think there was a handheld gaming device as well announced by Solana, again reminding everyone that, hey, we also sort of wanting to incubate our own gaming based ecosystem of games, which a lot of Solana competitors are also doing. So that was also yet another highlight of Solana Breakpoint. But moving on to another of many sort of underrated ones, they're all vying for similar sort of attentions, but in a finite sort of 2-day conference. But one that caught our eye was definitely the ZK compression sort of going live on mainnet. So that was from Light Protocol. So the Twitter handle or X handle is up on your screen there. For listeners, it's just Light Protocol, all one word. But ZK compression went live on Solana mainnet, and the benefits here, just 1,000x cost savings they're sort of claiming for Solana developers, a solution for state growth, and a foundation for ZK compute on Solana. What does this all really mean? It's just building on Solana and using Solana, by extension, will just dramatically be improved if this all, goes to plan with this ZK compression. And it's something we talk about a lot, just, on a tangent. Ethereum L2s, is Solana, they all actually have so many different avenues of potential, like 10x, even more growth. And it's quite, it's quite remarkable seeing, the options, and it's not as simple as just one roadmap, but you're also seeing all these other disciplines really growing and a lot of money going into them. And Solana and Ethereum, I think, will continue to benefit from this as time goes on. So Light Protocol is one of those examples for Solana here. Yeah,
that's a really good one. And even when you hear the word ZK compression, it sounds very confusing, but essentially it just means instead of paying, say, $10,000 to send 1 million NFTs, you'll probably be only paying 100x less. So you could be paying a couple $100. And that's why it's so important, because it unlocks a lot of use cases and encourages a lot more adoption on chain, because you don't have to have those high upfront costs. But then maybe looking at some other altcoin announcements from Breakpoint, Matt, there were so many there, but maybe we could finish on a couple that caught your eye. I know I saw WorldCoin IDs are coming to Solana, maybe part of that, Ethereum-centric applications that are building again, as we talked about. But Jupiter is probably a big one here. I think they've got a mobile app. They acquired Solana FM, another smaller application or builder, CoinHall. So Jupiter shaping up to be like the everything app for crypto.
Yeah, definitely. On my screen there, that's just 5, I guess, updates that Jupiter did have. And even in underneath all of those 5, there were probably multiple sort of sub updates or whatever. So Jupiter is one we'll be covering in this month's shift list update for sure, for our members, because it's been one of our most, I suppose, the one we're most excited about in the Solana ecosystem, or one of the top projects, and we've loved continuing to cover it, and you can tell they're in for a big 2025 for sure. And we'll update as well some other ones just very quickly. Phantom continues to really, I guess, hit the ground running in terms of their smart wallet infrastructure. That's happening a lot in the Ethereum ecosystem, but Phantom sort of is pioneering that over on the Solana ecosystem too. And I think just a reminder before we wrap things up, is you can watch any of this stuff on YouTube. They did a fantastic job quickly cutting the presentations and uploading them on the Solana YouTube channel as well. So any of your favorite Solana based projects, if they did present at the conference, definitely head over to YouTube and just type in their name, Solana Breakpoint, and it'll come up.
Yeah, what on there, Matt? I saw the Solana 2.0 one with Atoli. Huge, really accessible talk, only 20 minutes, so it's not daunting at all. a key takeaway I had actually was that he talks about Solana going to shed the beta tag because it's actually still in beta. He says once Firedancer comes out and it's achieved by 30% adoption by a lot of the validator and the clients, then he would be comfortable to saying Solana finally in mainnet.
Yeah, that's it. So we have ones from Drift, Fuse. I think we also got Sanctum. And there's a great Twitter thread which we'll link to as well, which really just summarizes all of the announcements. There would have to be towards 30, I would say, project announcements there at Breakpoint. So we'll link to that below as well, just to make it easier for you. But yeah, that's a wrap for Breakpoint. Was there anything you would like to leave our listeners and viewers with, Nick, as an overall sort of conclusion?
Yeah, my message is that Solana is really a top 3 crypto community, maybe obviously behind Bitcoin holders who are just so adamant with Bitcoin and they're such big advocates for, Bitcoin. Ethereum, obviously such a big ecosystem, but that third there, and it's not really even close in my mind, that's, that third biggest crypto community. And that's really important for how it's going to go and how it's going to compete and stave off these new competitors, whether it's Sui, Monad, or Say, that are going to be trying to come for their lunch really in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, well said. And one of those that, as you said, is close in the order of rankings to Solana, but just to reiterate your point, that's sort of daylight after Solana in terms of size of community and ecosystem. But one of them that is technically behind, probably 4th or 5th, maybe 6th, 7th, is Sui. It's catching up fast, but off a very low base. And they had a big week as well last week with Circle. I think this was at Token2049 as well, announcing that they will integrate USDC natively to Sui, which is, a really, I guess that just matters because it can really accelerate adoption and accelerate just stablecoin volumes, which is a very, very important sort of, pillar that you need for a successful blockchain. And we saw over the weekend as well, Sui just climbing the ranks in terms of total value locked. So it's up to now number 8 by all blockchains. So some layer 1s, some layer 2s. Of course, a lot of that is due to sort of incentives, but that's just a natural part of any sort of early stage blockchain. But yeah, good to see that progress as well for Sui.
And the other major altcoin update I saw was at the event, Sky blockchain, previously called Maker. They rebranded and formally launched, I think, their new DApp and tokens in a real full-fledged way. So huge deal here because, as we know, Maker, one of the powerhouses of DeFi, and they rebranded as Sky, which was a really controversial take given the brand that Maker had. But Sky really starting to make a really big impact on the stablecoin market, and they're actually looking to try and compete with the likes of Tether USDT and grow its USDS stablecoin, I think it's called. And they've even talked about trying to implement some yield in terms of that as well. So huge deal for Sky, and let's see how Sky goes, if they can really strangle some more market share.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes on that as well. In terms of underrated or overrated, there were plenty of candidates this week with so much attention on Breakpoint, but one that I saw not many people really taking notice of happened late last week, and that was the SEC in the US approving options for, one of the several Bitcoin ETFs that went live in January. So BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin ETF now has options. This is just significant for many reasons, which we'll link to below. There's a great sort of explanation of that from one of the team members at Bitwise, and really the short summary of it is really it should just help spur adoption of ETFs and lead to, ultimately greater demand for Bitcoin, knowing that these ETF issuers have to buy Bitcoin to essentially back up their ETF one for one. So yeah, that was great to see, and options were something that a lot of people were celebrating when the ETFs went live in January, but then they're like, they don't have options yet. So yet another thing is sort of ticked off for this adoption and rollout of ETFs throughout 2024 and heading into next year.
Thanks for that one, Matt. My shout out really goes to underappreciated and maybe Google Cloud's announcement that it's going to roll out Ethereum compatible infrastructure support, which is like a RPS service to simplify Web3 development. So Google is really making a lot of consistent developments in the space, not creating any tokens or any marketing, but just creating raw infrastructure support and simplifying hosting and running and developing cryptocurrency and Web3 development and services. So huge thing here from Google Cloud, and really excited to see Google continue to add support and add a lot of much needed infrastructure to the space.
Yeah, nice one there. I didn't even see that come through, Nick. So yeah, we can add that to the show notes as well for anyone interested. But yeah, that was a great recap of, Token2049 and Breakpoint. As we've said recently, we've got a lot of conferences coming up as an industry, and even project-specific conferences happening in October. So we're looking forward to keeping you posted on those. And I think Solana Breakpoint, they announced the next one will be December next year in the United Arab Emirates. So yeah, that's so keen to see what happens between now and then for Solana, but all heading in the right direction. But for now, that is a wrap. And if you are looking for more insights, such as the Donald Trump associated project that we covered earlier, that was the focus of last week's newsletter. You should head over to that and subscribe. So the Weekly Shift newsletter, you can find that at the following link. That is collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That is collectiveshift.io/newsletter.